Hey, Mort. Hey, Elvis. Hey, Einstein. Listen up. It's time for another stellar edition of .NET Rocks, the internet audio talk show for .NET developers with Carl Franklin and Rory Blythe. This is Karen Cavallero here to announce show number 54 with guest Carl Prothman. Recorded live Friday, March 5th, 2004. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter, and now offering classes remotely. Online at www.franklins.net. And by Data Dynamics, makers of ActiveReports.net. Simple, powerful, and cost-effective reporting for Windows Forms and ASP.NET web applications. Online at www.datadynamics.com. Support is also provided by Code Magazine, Microsoft Technologies in-depth for IT managers and developers. Online at www.code-magazine.com. And now, the man with more stones than John Ashcroft, Carl Franklin.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. Thank you, listeners, and welcome to another stellar edition of .NET Rocks. I'm Carl in New London. And as always, let me introduce my partner in crime here, the none other than Mr. Rory Blythe himself. Hey, man.
Hey, what's up, Carl?
How are you?
I'm doing pretty well.
You still talking to me?
Yeah, I'm still talking to you. I'm in the studio today. I've spent the whole week with you.
Yeah,
it's been pretty interesting. You know, got into town and
right.
Spent 3 days awake. 2 hours of sleep between 3 days. That was pretty tough. By the time I finally fell asleep, I was out of my mind. But that's cool because I'm feeling better now.
For those who don't know, Rory got off the plane. He took a train to New Haven from Providence, Rhode Island. Took another train from New Haven, Connecticut to Hartford, Connecticut. And stumbled into his room, took a look at the demo machines at Dev Days, tried to go to sleep, and then woke up in the morning and did a .NET presentation for Dev Days.
That was my hour of sleep. That was
yeah.
And I didn't even really fall asleep. I was halfway in a nightmare state the whole night. I was having that dream I've been telling people about where I saw this half woman, half tree that was slowly crawling around the ground, and it was absolutely sinister. Yeah, it was not pleasant. It might have been the blood-curdling screams outside the window that were
You were definitely
like
listening to port.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't keep a train of thought. I could not do it.
Yeah. But it was good nonetheless. I mean, you pulled it off, and it was a little bleary-eyed, but, you know.
Pulled it off-ish.
Pulled it off-ish. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it was good. It was good that you could do it. You actually weren't sure if you were going to be able to make the Hartford Dev Days at the last minute.
Yeah. I mean, in retrospect, it was a little bit crazy for me to have committed to that, but
it was kind of nutty.
You learn. You live and you learn.
So. And you're going to be doing Dev Days in Boston with us.
Right. And in Boston, I'm going to be wide awake because I'm going to take all sorts of Benadryl and whatever the night before so that I can fall asleep and have a good night's sleep, wake up, and give a good talk. So it's going to be good.
Yeah, and for those who, thinking that Dev Days is kind of ho-hum, yawny, boring, it's really good this year. We're doing 2 tracks. We're doing a smart client track, and we're doing a web security track. And the web security track has lots of things that you wouldn't necessarily think about in the security realm, things that we haven't even discussed here. And good stuff. Also, you get to see InfoPath, you get to see BizTalk 2004, and the closing keynote is like an hour of Whidbey. You know, get to see what's new in Whidbey.
And what is it, like $99 for the day?
Less. I think it's like $89.
Okay, $89. That's nothing.
What a deal.
Yeah.
And you also get to hang out with your local Microsoft sales group and the local regional directors, and, you know, they're always good fun to hang out with. But Pat Hines, who's the regional director for Boston, and I always do up, some sort of shtick at every Dev Days. We started last year with a sort of the blue pill, red pill theme, this sort of matrix thing. And I was actually the top-rated speaker, Dev Day speaker. Not that the rest of the RDs aren't
Mr.
awesome.
Fancy.
I'm not bragging.
Mr. Fancy Dev Days.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the rest of the RDs aren't awesome. They did a great job. I think it was actually partly the venue. We were at Foxwoods. Mm-hmm. And, how can you not be happy at Foxwoods? You can't, you can always, because you're always thinking, if this sucks, I can just go win some money or go have some great food or whatever, or listen to a band. But Pat's talk was, we did it together. We tag teamed, and that's how we do it. So he and I both do Hartford, and he and I both do Boston. So this year, the theme was James Bond, and we're like at the point now where we're looking at all these new toys, these new tools that are coming out, and we're kind of like in Q's lab, looking at all the gadgets, looking at the ray guns and the pocket knives and the things that shoot pellets across the street. And but the difference is that in 9 months they'll all be in Walmart. Right. Or in 6 months, 9 months, whatever. So that was Pat's idea. So I actually played Toy Boy just like I did last week. And we had fun. We did a great job. Anyway, so here we are, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better. You've been really, really good to me all week. I want to say that, everybody. Carl he's given me an incredibly good welcome. I mean, I've been sleeping in his studio. I've been eating his food, eating with his family, wearing his underwear, using his toothbrush.
Yeah, and the hookers helped, that all the hookers that came over last night, they were compliments of Franklin's Net,
Yeah, there's perks. Like syphilis.
That was a joke, honey. I didn't mean that. That was just a joke.
I can vouch for that. We didn't actually do anything last night. In fact, he made me drill holes in the walls.
and actually, we did do something a little weird last night. You started a sort of a firestorm on your weblog,
right?
The last couple days,
yeah.
And we just sort of played into that. But tell us how it started.
It started. I was reading my usual blogs. And I was getting caught up because I hadn't had a chance to read everything during the week while I was doing everything else and getting situated. And one particular blog, coolbits.nu, by this friend of mine, Avenel, had a post in it that was pointing to an article by Kathleen Dollard. Mm-hmm. And in the article, Kathleen was arguing that Microsoft is possibly losing hobbyist coders with the complexity of .NET.
Hobbyist coders being non-professional coders.
Right, like I run a flower shop, and I need to have an application that is going to help me manage my flower shop. My expertise is in flower shoppiness. It's not in writing applications. I am a hobbyist coder.
Yep.
And Kathleen was arguing that hobbyist coders are kind of like the canaries in the caves. Well, in the mines, the miners take down, and that when the canaries start dying or disappearing, then it could mean trouble for the miners. So the point is that as we lose hobbyist coders with .NET, there's a possibility that it's an indication that .NET might be a little too complex. And I kind of took a different approach. I was thinking that for me, .NET is actually simpler. It's easier. It makes more sense. It's more streamlined than anything I've used before.
But you're not a hobbyist programmer.
Right. I'm not a hobbyist programmer.
Right.
And I was also arguing that I didn't think that Microsoft should concern itself with the hobbyist demographic.
As much as they do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or in other words, the hobbyists are going to figure out a way to catch up. If they really want to use .NET, they're going to figure out a way to get involved with it.
And just to be fair, you didn't mean that they should, not address that crowd at all.
Exactly. The idea is not to ditch hobbyists.
Right.
The idea is to not cater to them at the expense of the professional.
Right.
Who has to use these tools every day.
Right. In other words, let's not go backwards to VB6 access. Let's move forward with the .NET. Give me all the rich stuff. And if you want to throw some high-level things on there for the hobbyist programmer, that's fine. But understand, I think what you were saying is that it's not for you.
Exactly. And
it's for them, not for you.
And I was also being called an elitist occasionally. And I wanted to make it clear that I, more than anybody, want a simpler, easier, more straightforward, cleaner programming model.
Yeah.
But I also want to retain some power. And to that end, I think that's probably why I've chosen .NET.
Yeah.
I'm not an elitist at all.
So you touched some nerves, and man, there was just the fur was flying.
Yeah, there's quite the argument going on.
And I couldn't help but chime in, and then somebody started calling me names, and, and we basically started calling each other names, just being funny. And we hope that people know that. But
yeah, it got a little messy, and it's still going on. But it's kind of a controversial topic.
It is, and it's sort of bubbling up. I mean, it's similar to the C# VB debate, but it's not really. I mean, a lot of the C# programmers obviously want the things that you want, and actually the things that I want too. When I advocate for the hobbyist programmer, it's so that we can add things on top of the complex models, which I think is what Microsoft is doing anyway. So it's kind of a moot point. That's what they're doing. So anyway. I got a few letters. Some are related to this issue, and some are in response to last week's show, which I thought was an awesome show.
I love that show. That was a great show. I had heard Ted Neward speak before, but I didn't know a whole lot about him. I'd heard him talk about Rotor, and on that show, I had all sorts of newfound respect for Ted Neward. And Bruce was incredible in the sense that here he is, this super duper Java guy. He's on this .NET show, and instead of things getting inflamed and turning into a big flame war, he just provided sensible arguments, and it was a great talk.
By the way, system.web.mail.
Cool.
Okay. So let's, and I learned, I'm not a Java programmer. I've looked at it. I've, looked at some Java. Obviously, it looks very similar to C#, and I have a newfound respect for the innovation that Java brought into, the industry.
Right.
I didn't get started writing real OOP code until VBNet and C#. Yeah. And, I've obviously limped along with VB before that. But
Java's valuable.
But yeah, Java did some really, really great things. And there you go. So I have some email. As you know, we read email because we get it. And why not read it? And it's also an opportunity to give out some useless crap. So this one comes from Jose, and it's a long one, but I'll just read a little bit of it. Hi. And Jose says, hi. I just ended the last show, and it is as good as the previous ones. Congratulations. One thing I missed in this Java.net thing is some reference to the open source Sun dialogues lately with questions as the one Don Box talks about in a particular article, which we will link to. How can this change the way we think in Java when it becomes an open source language? Is Java becoming an open source language? I don't even know.
I didn't know anything about that. I thought that Sun wanted to kind of hang on. Well,
I think, Don Box has been
so much, but
talking about that. There's been a little bit of buzz. I don't know what's going on, though. We'll have to find out. It was some references in the program, but not updated to this latest news. So we will post links to those latest news items.
That show could have gone on forever. That's the thing.
Oh, yeah.
We missed a lot of things that we could have talked about. So, of course, there are going to be issues we weren't able to touch on because it's a huge topic.
Yeah. And my brother, the Java programmer, Jay, he said the same thing. He said it was too short.
Yeah.
We could have talked for 4 more hours, and I agree. And we will have Ted
another
back.
show like that.
Absolutely. Also, about tools to integration tools, I am evaluating one produced with part of monocode that allows you to build front ends in ASP.NET for J2EE systems, among other things. It is at mainsoft.com/products, blah, blah, blah. And it's funny to write using the Java classes in C# or Java using part of the BCL. The one in mono. One part I agree with totally is a discussion about the different cultures. I have got the same feeling that was expressed in the conversation. I really got tired some time ago when all the technical discussion needs to end in Microsoft or the evil empire rather than a rational approach to the differences. Kind regards and thanks for this new and excellent program. Please continue like this for a long time, Jose. Jose, we will. And just to prove it, we're going to send you a .NET Rocks coffee mug. Enjoy it, my friend. We just wanted to give a shout-out to Ed Marquez. I'm sorry, Ed, Marquez, Marquez, from the West Coast. And he just signed up for the newsletter. Wanted us to give him a shout. How you doing? This one comes from Daniel Peterson. The subject is gasoline for the flames. And some comments on show 52.
Oh, dear. Okay.
Hi, Carl. And this one is long. This is the long one with code samples and stuff, so I'm going to pick and choose just a few highlights. I have some small comments to the latest show that I tuned into, Java with Ted Neward and Bruce Tate. By the way, record downloads this week.
Yeah.
This is a very, very popular show. First of all, I'd like to pour some more gasoline on the .NET language flames. I'm really a C# guy that moved over. Okay, well, let's just get rid of that one. No, I'm sorry. I'm just kidding, please. All right, I'm really a C# guy that moved over from C++, but during the last year, I have worked in a mixed environment with VBNet, C# and native C++. Learning VBNet after C# was really simple, but I came to realize that most statements that were made about VB.NET was wrong. VB.NET really can do the same things as C#. It even has some features that I would like to see in C#, like the handle syntax, but there are a few minor drawbacks with VBNet. Okay. Background compilation. This is a great feature, but it has to be smart. Currently, if the project file is big and the computer is slow, you end up with a development environment that doesn't work, and the great background compile feature has become counterproductive. Well, okay, so make sure you have a computer that's gutsy enough to handle that feature.
At least a Pentium 166.
At least. At least. And you may want to have a little bit more than 128 megs of RAM.
129.
Yeah, 129 would be preferable. Okay, and also there was a bug in the first version of Visual Studio.net that made background compiling grind to a halt if it was a big project. That has been fixed, so it is no longer a problem. That may be your issue as well. But I see that as a feature, not a problem. Handles keyword. This is also a great feature, but it has a drawback. It hides code from the developer. Okay. The code that is put into the assembly doesn't match what I wrote, and that is a big hazard when working with multi-threaded applications and control.invoke. Good point. I have experienced application deadlocks that originated from the invisible code. Okay, someone screwed up and synced locked an event of another object during the firing of events, but that's another question.
So
once again,
where are we pointing fingers now?
Yeah, that's right. Is that really something that we can blame on the language? He does have another comment here. Second, I'd like to comment on the non-programmer language approach. This really isn't a good idea. Here in Sweden, the IT boom hit us hard, and suddenly everybody should develop IT solutions. A lot of people got into the business that didn't or don't have a clue about the most simple fundamentals. They learned VB6 and or HTML and started to hack away. And what is the result? Failure.
I'll tell you what the result is. Contracts for me, my friend. All right? These people are good for my business.
Okay. Tons and tons of failed and out-of-control projects. I could go on and on with samples, but the conclusion is simple. If you don't understand software, don't try to develop it. Therefore, we shall not invent non-programmer languages. Well, okay.
Then it won't be a language. It'll be a system for creating an application.
That's exactly right. And, this is the key. This is the point that I was making on your blog, Rory,
right.
Which is that VB6 is not optimal plumbing code. All right, it sucks for plumbing code. It's basically an obfuscator for COM, and you really have to understand COM in order to understand that whole system. So yes, you're going to have situations where VB programmers are making assumptions about what's happening under the hood that are completely incorrect because they're uninformed, and they need to be informed, and I think that's the key. With .NET, Microsoft has fixed the plumbing problems. All right, there you go. They've fixed the plumbing problems. There are no plumbing problems like COM has. There also is a solid foundation, and this is continuing with Longhorn, a solid foundation for the low-level handling of code, the garbage collector, all that kind of stuff that now you don't have to do because you're programming in a managed language. So there's nowhere to go but up in higher level and higher level systems. And what Rory's saying and what I'm saying in different words, but it's true, is that the reason that you write software is because there's demand for it. And the reason there's demand is because the guy you're writing it for can't just go download it. All right. So if there was software out there that he could download and or drag, drop, and create and snap his fingers somehow and create, and it would do everything that he needs, you wouldn't have a job. Right? So what is going to happen eventually is that we're going to find these systems that are all based on managed code, so they're going to be absolutely righteous, where he's going to communicate his requirements somehow to that computer, and the computer's going to write the code. Whatever. BizTalk orchestration is the closest thing I can think of, and that thing is going to write the code in total, and there you go. And so there's going to be less and less need for your services.
It's a ways off, but
it's definitely a ways off. But
it's going to happen.
You can't deny that it's going to happen. Right. So there you go. Off my soapbox.
Good depressing way to start the
I know.
You're all going to lose your job someday.
And there was one guy on your blog who was just like depressed after I said that. And
but it's so far off. It really is.
And not only that is that everything's going to be changed by then. We're going to have new roles. There's still going to be a need for people with the brains to do things above and beyond that, right? Okay.
You'll have to change the computer's diaper or whatever that's writing the code for you, right? Well, we'll have to maintain something.
Something, that's right. There's definitely going to be a need for smart people, so don't give up your hope and your education. just yet.
And if it's a 4-year degree, remember you can major in whatever you want and then do whatever you want later on. You can major in Spanish and become a doctor, So
You can major in chemical engineering and become a programmer.
like your brother, right?
Yes.
Wait, is that what your brother did? No, he majored in some other kind of engineering.
Marine engineering, naval architecture.
Okay.
Yep. So Rory,
So Carl,
I think it's time for Google Weirdos. Again, we don't have a song yet, but we will. We were busy with Dev Days and everything else this week, but we'll get it.
yeah,
We'll
all
get
right.
you your Google Weirdos music, Mr. Weirdo.
All right. So
Let's define what Google Weirdos is. We had a little...
for those of you who don't know, Google Weirdos is this thing that I was putting together on my blog. It became a popular little feature, and the idea is that I comb my referral logs for the search engine phrases, and I look to find the most interesting ones. And then I post a few of them on my site, and I add a little one-liner commentary or something like that, just to add a little bit of color. But for the most part, these things are strange enough and weird enough that I don't need to add anything to make them interesting, because people are just freaking strange on their own already. So I don't have to do anything. And we're turning this into a smaller segment for the show.
Right. You do this on a regular basis on your
Right.
weblog.
Right, and this is going to be a regular thing on the show too. And it's changing a little bit because as it grows in popularity, more and more people every week are trying to contact me through Google Weirdos.
Right.
So instead of getting fan mail, although I guess fan would actually be a strong word for it, because some of this stuff is about as warm and friendly as a swift kick to the groin. But I'm getting some kind of contact from my readers through the Google Weirdos, which is fascinating. People are writing to me through Google. That is weird. All right. It's kind of like using Excel as a database. But anyway. So this time I'm going to start out with 5 messages that were sent to me through Google. I'm going to have to start dividing those out, separating them. But they're kind of cool, which is why I want to do them. So here's the first one.
Okay.
Rory Blythe, he's the man. If he can't do it, no one can. And I got to tell you, that's a fine thing to stick in Google. All right. And that's from Mark Kenyon. And Mark's been a regular commenter.
Yeah, regular listener too.
Yeah, so got to get a shout out to Mark. We got another one here. Rory Blythe, hello from Down Under, which is great because the Aussies have been a really...
Yeah, they love us.
Yeah.
Even though they have to get up at 4 a.m. to listen to the show.
Right. And I get them on the blog and everything. Aussies are great, so I wanted to give them a shout out. Shout out to all of Australia.
Australia rocks.
Yeah. Rory Blythe, smart device. I got your smart device right here. I don't know what that person's talking about.
It's probably from the Bronx. I got your smart device right here.
Then we got Rory, I want to be a Google weirdo. Well, you are now. Congratulations. We have Rory Blythe has grape-sized hemorrhoids. They're not actually. They're sort of like currants, okay? Getting treatment. Everything's better now. So those are all the I'm going to contact Rory Blythe through Google Weirdos and
those are kind of like not as fun as the ones that just landed on your blog by accident.
Right, exactly. But I like them just because it's a fun way to communicate with people. It's clever. Some of these people are getting pretty clever.
And by the way, speaking of Google, you have the #1 site
for Rory. At least for the time being, I am the #1 Rory on the internet.
So if you go to Google and type Rory, you're you're #1.
Yeah. For the moment. I was #1 last week, too, and then it plummeted back down to 2 again. But for the moment, I am 1. So moving on, we have what to do before you die. I mean, that's just weird.
Oh, my God.
Like somebody's sitting there on their deathbed and just Googling for how do I prepare for this? Well, I don't know. I can pack your suitcase or I don't know. I guess if I knew that I were about to die, I would probably strap dynamite to my body, drive my car off a bridge and do heroin on the way down. I don't know. Just go out and have a good time on the way down. Just go out with a bang. So that's my advice to you. Next one is what people think about me. And these sorts of searches confuse me because they're so general. I mean, Google searching, like 8 trillion web pages, and it's just supposed to know who you are, and it's supposed to care? Yeah, it doesn't. Here's another good one. Carl Franklin, Rory Blythe, gay marriage, white trash hell. You have described my week. Yeah. It's been a little bit like being married to you, Carl, you know? Sleeping on your futon, eating your food.
Yeah. And the funny thing was the interaction you had with Tom the other day.
No. Yeah, because I've been having to shower, and all I've got is a shower on the 4th floor.
He's
here
staying
in
at the office,
yeah,
basically, while
office.
he's looking for a place.
and I was downstairs on the 4th floor in the middle of the night, just wearing a towel and carrying my toiletries around. And this guy goes, Tom, I later find out, goes walking into a door, and he said...
And there's you in a towel.
Right, yeah. He looks at me. He gives me these funny, weird eyes, like, what are you doing down here? And I just look at him, and I don't know what to say. This is when I'm still on my 2 hours of sleep, and I wasn't thinking straight. And I'm standing there just body glistening. And I said, I'm here with Carl Franklin. I was like, oh, damn. I mean, that's not what I mean. I mean, I'm sleeping in Carl's bed. I mean, wait, no. That's no good. I mean, Carl and I are kissing upstairs. No, that's not. No. Yeah, so that was probably not the best way to introduce myself, but... Just the wrong thing kept coming out.
Absolutely.
Then moving on, we've got baby seal eating.
What?
In a world of 6 billion people, Carl, there's just room for everybody, right?
Baby seal eating.
Baby seal eating.
I want to know what you wrote to make people get there from baby seal eating.
I was reviewing one of the Portland Nerd Dinners, or writing it up, and that was one of those weeks where I posted one of my Linux versus Microsoft opinion things. It's actually not so much versus, but it always turns into that. And... I decided to have a little bit of fun and talk about how at the Nerd Dinner we engaged in the ritual Microsoft baby seal clubbing.
Oh, okay.
Because we're all so evil, the people who hang out with Microsoft
I got it.
types.
So it was a tongue-in-cheek thing gone awry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, somebody actually found it and was like, are you serious about clubbing seals?
Oh, God.
I was like, yeah, we were at the mall. We got the seals out. We clubbed them at the mall. It was really great. It was a little
I saw a bumper sticker. You know how they have I heart my dog like I love my dog?
Yeah.
I saw one, I spayed my cat.
Oh, no.
And then I saw another one, I club seals.
God, that's so bad.
It's really bad.
Bad. And this hits kind of close to home because we went to the aquarium yesterday.
Yeah.
Carl and I took his 2-year-old to the aquarium, and she slept the whole time. It's one of those great situations where you go for the kid, but it's obvious that the grown-ups are the ones who wanted to go.
Well, she slept until we were ready to go, and then she started running around, Nemo, Nemo, Nemo.
So Carl and I went and watched the sea lion show, and we kind of clapped. We were like, yay, sea
She was awake for that.
Yeah, that's true. She was awake for that. Well, it was enthralling. Those things
Yeah,
are
it was.
fascinating.
Yep.
Okay. So moving along, we've got how to scream while singing. And I just want to tell you that unless you've got 2 throats or you're one of these Tuvan throat singers, you're not going to have a lot of luck with that. You have one facial orifice, and you're going to have to either scream or sing, do one or the other, one at a time. But if you do want to learn how to scream, I can provide consultation in that area for a small hourly rate, as you will find out later on in the show when we play my song.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to play some original Rory music here.
Yeah, so stick around. We've got this one. Some of them don't make any sense. These searches shouldn't wind up anywhere. It says Braun, B-R-A-U-N, Braun method squirting. What the hell is that? Braun method squirting.
I really don't know, man.
That's why.
Wait
it's
a minute,
Google
squirting
Weirdos.
code? You squirt code?
Don't try to rationalize this. It was a fine attempt, but don't. Yeah, it's not going to work.
Braun method squirting.
Then we got another one here. Who are these people? I want to know. People getting pooped on.
Oh,
what
come
kind
on.
of a weirdo are you?
Good Lord.
And how'd you get to my site?
Yeah,
that's kind of embarrassing. It said something about me, really. We got another one. What do guys think of urinals? Well, I'll tell you. If they're the stand-up in the wall kind, then it's okay as long as there's not too much splashback. If they're the kind of open on the floor where it's just sort of a bowl sticking up like what they have at the movie theater, where you have no privacy at all.
This is the kind of quality technical education you get on .NET Rocks, folks.
These are, well, you know what, though? We talk about the technical stuff, but you have to talk about the non-tech stuff. Because where are we going to have discussions about urinals if we don't have them here?
I actually got an email last week, and I didn't read it, from somebody who said, I'm really enjoying your show, but, you know, do we really have to have all the foul language? I mean, can I really send my students to your site as a learning resource? And the answer is no. Don't send a grade school person to my site.
Yeah, you can send your college students because
your college students, fine.
They got mouths like drunken sailors, and they're
That's
going
right.
out on the weekends.
We do nothing compared to what they say.
Yeah, we're pretty tame.
Really.
And then finally, lastly...
Except for that pooped on thing. That was just over the top, Rory. And I think we ought to beep that.
Well, you know what it is? Well, you know what, though? My girlfriend and I were talking about this. Poop is almost more obscene than the other words for the same matter. And we don't know why, but it bothers us more than using the other words like the SH
Maybe because
word.
it links us to animals, you know?
It sounds so base and visceral.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so last one is it safe to sunbathe naked? And yeah, in my backyard especially. So
You have sun in Portland?
Not exactly. When it stops raining, we go outside and we get tanned. So.
Okay.
So that's Google Weirdos for the week.
Google
it was a little weird.
Weirdos.
It was also
yeah.
I had less to choose from because my wonderful hosting company, Web Host for Life, which takes down one service each week temporarily, decided to stop logging everything for the first 3 days of this month. So I'm missing stats, and for the last month, I'm missing stats. I'm missing Google searches.
Well, we'll move you over here to a real hosting company soon.
Yeah.
Yep. And what do you expect for $10 a month, right?
$9.95.
Yeah. Okay.
Let us split hairs.
Yes. Well, my friends and my listeners out there, how many people we have listening live right now? He's my 64. Wow. Better than last week, actually. And no glitches. So, Rory, our guest today is none other than the ADO connection string guru, Carl Prothman. And Carl Prothman, he is a Microsoft ASP.NET Most Valuable Professional, MVP. He holds a Certified Computer Professional, CCP, from Institute for Certification of Computing Professionals, ICCP. Boy, I'm in acronym hell here, Carl. As an internationally known .NET training and INETA speaker, Carl has spoken at several major conferences such as VS Live, VBITS, TechEd, and also to several local user groups such as the Seattle .NET Users Group and the .NET Developers Association in Redmond, Washington. Carl teaches ADONet and ASP.NET at Bellevue Community College, BCC, in Redmond, Washington. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautics and Astronautics. Wow. A genius among us, Rory.
Right.
We're not worthy. Degree from University of Washington. Carl has worked for customers such as Microsoft, Boeing, and Rockwell International, and is currently the president of Able Consulting. And by the way, CP, which is what I'm going to call you, otherwise I'll be talking to myself. I looked at your resume online, and it's pages and pages and pages and pages. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what you do. So welcome to .NET Rocks, Carl.
Well, thank you.
Or CP.
CP, how are you?
I'm actually doing fairly well. Yourself?
Good, good. You sound good.
It's nice to talk to a West Coaster.
It is. Well, for Rory especially, because, that's his stomping grounds. So, Carl, I've known you for a long time, and the thing that your historical claim to fame in my class, anyway, is your website of just hundreds and hundreds of connection strings for every possible data source known to man. That has turned out to be a very impressive thing that anyone I show.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's probably the largest collection of ADO and the ADO.NET connection strings on the Internet.
It begs the question, Carl, why isn't there a official repository? I mean, why did they leave it up to you to do that?
Well, there is, and it's, there's all these connection strings, well, most of them are in MSDN. It's just a little difficult to find. So.
Oh, okay.
And part of my frustration was trying to find these connection strings, and so I started to record them. And then I thought, well, heck, I'll just publish them. And then I started getting these connection strings from all over the world, people saying, hey, you don't have this one.
Right. Oh, wow.
It just kind of grew from there. So.
Wow, so just by being a focal point for connection strings, they just sort of came to you.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
So you have up there, because Carl and I were talking about it earlier this morning over coffee. So what do you have? You have a big list, and is it sort of like templates, and people can just grab them, fill in the blanks, and run? Or how does this work?
Well, it's basically, if you go to my website, www.able-consulting.com, and click on Technology tab, you'll see a connection page. And I list all of the OWC drivers, all of the OLADB providers, and the newer .NET data providers.
Nice.
I also list some of the older technology like RDS, which Microsoft considers obsolete now.
Right.
Things like that.
Okay, so that's actually a good thing because as Carl and I were also talking about, there's no standard here. Everybody's just kind of implementing willy-nilly, doing whatever they want to do. And I've definitely had the problem of having to go and look things up. I had no idea it was on MSDN.
Yeah, I didn't either,
I didn't have a clue that there was anything up there like that.
Not a complete list, but it's separated out in different sections. A little hard to find in there.
Right, and you have Oracle, you have MySQL, you have, comma-separated files. I mean, you have everything.
Yeah. The most common mistake most people make with connection strings is they put the space before and after the equal sign. And then when the parser reads through that, it doesn't pick up the name correctly or the database, things like that. And the other one is people tend to put an incorrect database or server name in there. And some of the error messages you get back are fairly, you can tell what's going on, but in some cases you can't. What most bites people is creating an instance or connection to an instance of SQL Server. And you have to have a backward slash, server name, backward slash, and then the instance name. And if you're going to connect from the client, you have to have MDAC 2.6 installed, which a lot of people don't know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you're up on all the versions of MDAC and their issues and their problems, and because there were some more recent ones that caused more problems than they fixed, right?
Yeah. The bottom line is everyone should always do a Windows update and get the latest patches.
Right.
Right. And even with Office, you want to make sure you do the Office update. Make sure everything's up to date in there also.
As of this recording, it's 2.8. Are we up to?
Yeah, I believe that is the current version.
So what have you been working on lately, Carl? What's foremost in your mind, technology-wise?
Well, I'm an independent consultant, so I've been contracting off and on over at Microsoft on different jobs, and currently working for a client in Bellevue and building ASP.NET websites.
Can you talk about what you've been doing at Microsoft,
or
do you have one of those Bible-sized NDAs that...
I have signed so many NDAs over there, it's unbelievable.
Well, that's perfect. So you don't even know what you signed, which means you could probably talk about it, right?
There you go.
Yeah, mostly have been end-tier ASP.NET SQL Server backend type of applications.
Cool.
And, some really cool web services that provide data from huge back-end databases, main role databases, things like that. So
what else have you been working on aside from the Microsoft stuff?
Well, I've been real busy with the .NET Developers Association. I'm the president of that user group.
Okay.
Now that's different from INETA, right?
Right. INETA is the international umbrella type of organization, and they provide speakers to the growing worldwide community of .NET user groups. And if the user group belongs to INETA, they get like 3 speakers per year they can request. And so I'm one of INETA speakers and have gone to different user groups. You're an INETA speaker too, right, Carl?
Yep. That's always great fun. INETA basically flies us around the world and lets us talk to user groups who would normally not have the resources to get you to come and speak to them.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
They fly you around the world?
Yeah, usually in your area, right? So
around the world in your zip code.
No. In like the United States. Like I could go anywhere in the United States, really. They try to get, speakers who are in Europe for European user groups, obviously, and for other countries, but
or a transplanted Portland Oregonian to go speak in Barcelona.
That may be.
Yeah, I can dream. Yeah. Well, that's good because I've always wondered about INETA.
Yeah.
Right? It's one of these things that I always hear about, but I've never really quite nailed
down
what they do.
Yep, they represent all the .NET user groups out there. They're funded by Microsoft and by other companies that just want to help the cause. And a user group will request a certain speaker or a certain topic, and INETA will send out email to the speakers bureau and who wants to go, and they put it together and they give you a stipend. It's not much, but you do it for the exposure and you do it for the fun of it. And
Right.
Yeah.
So I've been pretty busy with the .NET Developers Association, and in our website www.netda.net.
Cool.
If people are interested, we meet at Redmond on the Redmond campus every Monday night. The first Monday is our web developers meeting, and Paul Litwin heads that up. And then the second Monday is our general meeting, and I head that one up. Our third Monday is we alternate between database and beginner. Database is Bill Vaughn does that one, and beginner is Brad Connell. And then we just added a fourth Monday, Visual Basic, and Robert Green will be heading that one up.
All right. That's our friend Robert out there.
Yeah.
Robert and I sort of have a similar mission, although his is officially Microsoft and mine is sort of out there in the periphery, but it's to sort of, as you said, as we were talking about hobbyist programmers, to bring back the stranded Visual Basic programmers into the fold of .NET,
right.
as painlessly as possible.
Exactly.
I really think Whidbey is going to help a lot in that regard.
And as .NET programmers, you should really know both C# and VB.NET.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. As Dan Appleman said on our second show, Carl, he said that somewhere along the line, a company is going to pay you more money to write the program in C#, and you have a moral obligation to take that money.
Though, it definitely is important because I'm looking at I'm a C# programmer by day, but I'm looking at a contract right now that I understand would involve some VB.NET programming. And fortunately, when I got started with .NET, I was doing a lot of VB.NET work.
Right.
So it's absolutely important to understand the differences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find VB.NET extremely easy to program with because I don't have to worry about the case sensitivity,
sure,
which always bites me, and then those darn semicolons.
Well, and there are a couple more areas, and I like to bring this up whenever I'm talking about the advantages of VB.NET. There's two areas. One is that events are saner. I like the C# method of doing events because I've gotten used to it and it makes sense to me, but at the same time, the handles keyword is really nice. And then number two is late binding. Whenever I'm doing anything with late binding, I whip out VB.NET.
Yep.
Right? I'm not gonna do that in C#.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can definitely code a lot faster, in my opinion, with VB.NET.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can definitely. But you're right. It is good to do both. Everybody's got a highly emotionally charged opinion about that, mostly right. Because, and we were talking about this too, is that I think that programming in your language sort of gets to the heart of who you are, your ego. And it's so closely linked to your ego. And I think especially for men because, and this is something you may have not thought about, women can create life. Let's face it. They've got this power to do this. We participate in the ritual, but we really do a very small part.
Right.
And, it's just an amazing thing that a woman can do. And so, men are left to technology to sort of do that. And writing a program is, in my life, has been, short of making a work of art or something like that, which is less intelligent, if you want to call it that. Writing a program is really the only way that you can create an intelligence that has a sort of a life of its own. And so I consider it a very human issue. And so when you say, my programming language is better than your programming language, man, it's like to a guy, that's like saying your kid is the ugliest mother, that I've ever seen in my life because it's got the curly braces on the side and he wears those stupid semicolons on his ears. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's really the issue, and that's why it's very hard to get a clear head about it.
Yeah, my programming language is an honor student at Kirby Middle School. That kind of stuff. Same sort of deal. Well,
anyway, we do have a question here for you, Carl, from an alert listener. David Salmon says, I have a query which runs in about 3 seconds against an Access 97 database using MDAC 2.1. When I switched my VB6 project to use MDAC 2.5, the query now takes about 55 seconds on average. The query was not changed at all, and the database is the same. I haven't tried MDAC 2.8 yet, but why would the query be that sluggish just by switching to 2.5?
Right. So he's probably using a DSN through OWC control panel. And when you switch from the older MDAC, I believe there was it has a smaller cache, and so if you just delete that DSN and recreate it, it should have a lot faster performance. The other thing is you want to make sure you have the versions of the JET database and MDAC. So if you go through if you're using the 4.0 OLEDB provider, I don't know what he's using, so I'm either jumping between OWC drivers or
we're actually going to try
providers.
We'll actually try to get him on the phone here so he can explain that.
But you'll have a performance hit if you go from the 4.0 OLEDB provider to a JET 3.31 or whatever it was, 3.5.
3.5,
yeah. And so you want to upgrade your database to the 4.0 version. Yeah.
Is that, you think, a definite definitely the issue there, or could it be something else?
Depending on what driver or OLEDB provider he's using, it could be one of those issues. But I have a bunch of FAQs up on my website, and in addition to the call and connection strings I have up there, and one of those questions deals with that performance issue right there.
Okay, great. Wow, that was great.
Yeah. Guy, whoever you are out there with your question, go to that. Yeah, go to the site.
Definitely.
And check that out.
So what have you been doing with ASP.NET? You say you've been working on a lot of ASP.NET applications. What kinds of things have those involved?
Well, some of the issues that I've been dealing with lately are security.
Yeah, I hear that's a popular topic.
Yeah, especially with the SQL injection and cross-site scripting.
Yeah, those are probably the two biggest problems that you have, especially with the old ASP style.
Exactly.
With all this legacy stuff floating around.
For your listeners, with SQL injection is where a user is able to enter in either in a form or on a URL SQL that will they can inject into the actual query that's being or command that's being run.
The typical example they give is where you have a login, with an email and a password box, and in the email box you close it off with a single quote, and a semicolon and a go, and then just a totally new SQL statement. So what happens is if the programmer is putting and assembling a query string together just by concatenating the strings, and they execute that, you're basically giving them a window into your SQL server, which they can do nasty things.
So, a lot of the advice I hear out on the internet or on the net is, use stored procedures. But that's really not at the heart of what really is a solution.
It's the parameters, right?
Yes, you have to use SQL parameters or OLADB parameters. And because the parameters will take care of the single quote problem for you. Okay. It doesn't allow it will double the quotes up for you. And that way you can't terminate a single quote and then an or, 1 = 1 and a dash. That won't work anymore. So whether you're calling stored procedures or you're using parameterized queries, always use parameters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that when you create a SQL Server user in SQL Server 2000, the default database that it goes to is master.
Right.
And since if they have access to master, and if you do have a SQL injection hole, they're able to query the system tables then. And so one of the best practices is not to give access to the master database at all.
Absolutely. See, that's a huge deal, because one of the things I think about with SQL injection attacks is that a lot of the time people just simply aren't going to know anything about your database schema, but they're not going to have any problem figuring out about default tables and system tables and things like that.
Right.
So.
Right. I've suggested to the SQL folks over at Microsoft that they change this in Yukon, and of course they have a different scheme now. So I believe it takes care of that problem. The other issue is cross-site scripting.
Yeah.
And this is a very common problem. I mean, a lot of programmers don't even realize that this is a problem when they just the response back what the user has typed in, and if they don't HTML encode it, then the user is able to enter in script, and then they can redirect the user to another page, and it can look exactly like maybe the site that you're at, and can collect information, and the user doesn't even know.
So a lot of our listeners either might not be aware of this or know how to handle it. So what are you doing to deal with this?
Well, there's two schools of thoughts. Either you filter on the input, or you HTML encode on the output. And my rule of thumb is you always HTML encode on the output, no matter what data where it came from. Because sometimes you're typically pulling data out of the database. Well, you don't have a lot of control in some cases where that data comes from.
Right.
And so you always want to HTML encode on the output.
Now, does that mean you shouldn't just set textbox1.text equal to or label1.text equal to just some raw text? You should put that into a string and HTML encode it and then set it into the label?
Yeah, you always do a server.html encode. And then, of course, the input. You can stop you can grep for or use a regular expression validation control to look for script tags, and don't allow those. Or another thing is you can minimize the length. Set the max length of what they can enter in, because a lot of these cross-scripting attacks require long strings, and so you can stop it also with setting the max length.
Oh, good.
And what are some of the nasty things people can do with cross-site scripting?
Well, they can still, believe it or not, the cookie off your desktop. And you would think that, no, they can't access my desktop.
A cookie off your desktop? You mean just off your
in your computer, off of a client computer. And most people think, well, how can you do that? I'm in my home somewhere, But, they can, with this cross-site scripting, they are able to redirect with JavaScript and add the cookies to the URL. So when it goes to the hacker's page, they can read the cookies. And if you store sensitive information in that cookie, like the example of a credit card or whatever, which you never want to do, they got it.
Wow.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to make credit card cookies. I mean, but how's the user going to know? How are they going to, unless you comb your cookie? Here's a good plug-in for somebody to write, right? A little service that sits out there and looks at your cookie files, and just, for things like Visa, MasterCard, credit card, or something like that, to let you know when a site has put, something sensitive in your
Carl, that's worth at least $10,000. We should have talked about that off the air.
That's true. That's true.
Too late now.
I'm constantly doing that, Somebody will just ask me a question. Yeah, why don't you just blank? And it's some fundamental thing that just shakes their world, and I can't collect on that,
Yeah.
Oh, well.
So that's what community .NET Rocks.
Exactly. That's what this community is all about. Yeah. All right, well, we have some questions from one Ken McCord. We were trying to get him on the phone, but apparently he gave us his fax number and not his phone number. Ken, hi, guys. I've got a bunch of questions, but here are 4, and I think one of them you've already answered. 1, if you make a change to the web config file, are both your application and sessions stopped and restarted?
Yes. Every time you make a change to web.config, it restarts your application, and hence the session application variables go away.
And am I wrong in thinking this, but doesn't it let any existing sessions continue until they're...
I believe that is correct. It will phase out, and then the new app will start up as new users.
Right. If it's in the middle of spitting out a page, it's not going to just stop.
Right.
Yeah.
See you later.
Exactly.
2, can you explain why when you set enable view state equals false, ASP text boxes, ASP checkboxes, etc. are still repopulated? I thought these controls state was provided by view state, but when you turn enable view state to false, you still keep these controls state when doing a post. I'm confused about this, and so are about everyone else I talk to. I haven't seen that behavior. When I turn enable view state off, it goes away.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen it before, but other than the only comment I have is you got to remember that the values in the controls are not in view state, right? So
that's right.
When you do a post back, ASP.NET will go ahead and pull the values and repopulate the controls. And maybe in this case, it's repopulating the value of that checkbox.
That's right, and not to sound like check your code, but check your code, Make sure you're not doing it.
Yeah.
By the way, on the show we did a long time ago, not too long ago, with Dino Esposito, he told me about a trick that he did in his book, in his big tome, which I use as the textbook for my ASP.NET class. And that is, he rewrote the view state handling code in the page object. So he creates a new page object, as most sane people do, and he overrode a couple of members, private members or protected members, basically that persist and retrieve the view state data. And so his solution was to write it out to files, to write the view state to a file with a unique name for that session with a unique name. I basically took that code, rewrote it as VBNet code, and put it in the session. So because it's in the session, it follows you from page to page, and it's specific to that particular person. And then you don't have to necessarily use the file system. You can use whatever system you're using for sessions underneath. So that's pretty cool. And what it does is it takes the view state data out of the web browser that gets sent to the client, and instead puts it on the server which is in some cases a lot better, especially if you have a lot of view state data.
There's some third-party tools that do that too. I know that Scott Hanselman pointed to one that sounded pretty slick.
Cool.
Yeah.
And David Salmon, who asked the question earlier, clarifies here. He says, can I use MDAC 2.5 against an Access 97 database using the Jet 4.0 provider instead of 3.5? I will delete and or recreate the DSN as per your suggestion. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, you can use. I forget which version. There's so many versions. I forget which version the 4.0 OLEDB provider was released with. If it was 2.5 or 2.6. I believe it was 2.6 it was released in. And the 2.5 might have the 3.5 in it. Not too sure. I don't know. There's so many versions of MDAC, and
right.
They yanked it out. They yanked the OLED provider out, and they put it back in.
Right, and I think it still applies. Go up to Carl's site and check it out in the facts section. All right, Carl, sit tight. We're going to have a musical interlude here. Rory's going to lay on us some original tunes.
Some
screaming, and when we'll come back with the rest of the show. So we'll be right back.
Never
Hey, Carl here. I want to talk to you some about ActiveReports.net from Data Dynamics. This is a product that is a new .NET version of their very popular Active Reports for VB6 for COM applications. And it goes back to the idea that we want to create a report and associate it with a particular project. Instead of having a report on a server somewhere, which is more like the Crystal Enterprise SQL Reporting Services model, we want to associate the report right in the application. Web application, ASP.NET, Windows application, Windows Forms, doesn't matter. So you create a report, you create a data source, you drag, you drop, you set up your controls on that report, and then you view that report. Now the viewer supports PDF, supports HTML, supports just standard text, and you have all the great features that you need in a report builder, and best of all, it's not going to break the bank. So go out and download your evaluation copy of ActiveReports.net right now at www.datadynamics.com. All right, now let's get back to this great talk with Carl Prothman about ADONet, ASP.NET, connection strings, security, right here on .NET Rocks. Don't go away. Rory, that was a pretty good tune. I enjoyed that.
Stop it.
No, I really did. You know, it brought me back to my high school days, the sort of the 80s sound. I like that.
The 80s sound?
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's when I grew up, so there's going to be hints of the 80s in there.
Yeah, it's like U2 kind of very kind of hip sound. I like it.
Yeah, well, that's actually one of our older songs. We've got a lot of stuff.
Now, who's we?
My buddy Felix Mercer.
Cool.
He's the guy I play music with back in Portland.
Cool.
And he's just like super genius with the music. I just scream over it, and I do the guitar parts, and I help him write some of the music. But the cleanliness, the polish there, that's all Felix. He's really good with this stuff.
What is it? What does he use to publish it, to produce it with?
Oh man, everything.
Everything.
We've been using a lot of Logic. We've been using Reason. We've been using Rewire.
Mac-based stuff?
No, it's all PC.
Huh.
Yeah, it's all PC.
Sweet.
Because we wanted to get our music machine for less than $3,000. So everything's running on Windows.
All right. Well, we're back anyway. And before we bring Carl back, it's time for the Linux vulnerability of the week, ladies and gentlemen. And I just have to qualify this by saying, no, we don't hate Linux. We don't hate Linux people. But what we want to do is give equal time to the vulnerabilities and the bugs in the Linux operating systems that you never hear about, basically because people don't care. So we're doing some of that now. Just, Windows has bugs. We know it has bugs. We're not saying it doesn't. It's just, equal time, right?
Right. Everybody's got problems.
Everybody's got problems.
Not just Windows, but it looks in the media like it's just Windows sometimes.
And basically, we're refuting the claim by Linux zealots who say that Linux doesn't have bugs.
So this is not an attack. It's not even a defense.
No,
it's just
not.
Contributing to the greater corpus of knowledge.
That's right. It's a knowledge. It's for your education,
Edumacation.
Folks. Edumacation. This one happened March 2nd, and this was released by the linuxsecurity.com advisories. I won't go into the advisory number, but anyway, it is a rsync heap-based overflow. This is a heap-based buffer overflow in rsync before 2.5.7 when running in server mode. Allows remote attackers to execute arbitrary code and possibly escape the chroot jail. The Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures product at cve.mitre.org has assigned the name CAN 2003-0962 to this issue. Thank you very much. And that is our Linux Vulnerability of the Week.
Linux vulnerability.
Actually, you know what we can do? We can say that we're providing this service for our Linux for our Linux listeners, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's what it's for, Carl. While we're there, though, can I say the one thing that Scott Stansfield said at my user group meeting he talked at? Scott came and he talked, and he was saying that Windows users and programmers are like Coke drinkers. And, Linux, Java, whatever else, they're like Pepsi drinkers. And the difference is that Coke drinkers are secure with themselves. They're like, hey, I like Coke. It's no big deal. I like to drink Coke. And then the other people want you to drink Pepsi, right? Where'd the Pepsi Taste Test Challenge come from, right? This is Pepsi. And they're the ones who have the sort of all-on a slot. So for some Windows users, the idea of zealotry is kind of foreign. Because I notice that when I'm hanging out with my Windows buddies, they don't really try to shove anything down my throats or down anybody else's throats. Some of them do, of course, but I found much less zealotry in the Windows world, so it's not as familiar a topic for us because we're Coke drinkers.
I don't see too much of that in the areas where I work, and if you go out to the different news groups out there, you might get some bigots on bigots, but other than
plus
that,
you're in Redmond, right? So
the Coke drinking capital of the world.
That's right. The Pepsi people stay away pretty much.
Another thing I've been doing is been involved with the MVP program, the Most Valuable Professionals with Microsoft.
Yes.
I don't know if folks out there know what the MVP program is about.
I found they really don't. I mean, most people think that it's sort of an elite title, but not really sure what it means to them.
Right. It's basically Microsoft acknowledges folks who are active participating in the Microsoft technical communities around the globe. For example, in the public news groups, if you go to msnews.microsoft.com, there's a whole range of news groups out there, and MVPs will go volunteer their time to answer questions out there. And, if you ask a question, 9 out of 10 times an MVP will answer. And the other places, like over in the forums on www.asp.net.
Right.
And if you have any kind of ASP.NET questions, that's a great resource.
How long have you been an MVP?
I started back in 1998.
Okay.
I was a Visual Basic MVP, and Ed Hickey and John Perry were my MVP leads back then. And then I switched over to being an ASP.NET MVP in 2002 with Ben Miller as my MVP lead.
Cool.
And so it's kind of cool. Are you going to go to the MVP conference this year?
I'm not able to go because I'm teaching, but I was going to say that the MVP program has sort of expanded its requirements or its prerequisites, whereas before it was just the forums and the news groups and things where people helped out. Now they're sort of giving MVP recognition to anybody who's in the community and visible in any medium, not just those.
Right. It used to be just in the news groups.
Right. It used to be just in the news groups. Now we have weblogs. We have, .NET Rocks, for example. I became an MVP for Visual Basic last year. And a lot of it was, because of what I'm currently doing in .NET Rocks, but also an acknowledgement of what I had been doing in the past with Carl and Gary's VB homepage and other things.
Community work, basically.
Community work, yeah. And just doing it because you want to help people.
Exactly.
Okay, but CP, as someone who is not an MVP, who's not a most valuable, but simply a relatively valuable, or maybe not even valuable at all, P. I'm one of the lesser
P's. Someone's a
Ps.
C# programmer.
What goes on in the program? I've always wondered about this because there are a lot of acronyms floating around. You got the MVPs, you got the RDs, you got this, you got that. What do? Are you taken to some special island somewhere where they lavish you with gifts and coconut-flavored alcohol beverages, or what's going on?
Well, we volunteer our time, and Microsoft recognizes by giving us free MSDN subscription.
Oh, cool.
And we go to a conference once a year, and plus we have private news groups where we can have access to.
Yeah, I was going to say
questions.
that's the thing that really I enjoy out of it is because I can send an email to, my lead and say, hey, I'm having a problem with this product, and you get an email or a call back from somebody on that team. I mean, they give you access to the programming teams inside Microsoft.
Exactly.
Which is, and they, as Carl was just saying, as CP was just saying, through the private news groups or through email. That's valuable.
Yeah, and that's very valuable because then you're able to ask the hard questions and get responses back, and you can escalate things. And it's, the program does a really good job in that area. So
yeah.
So in return for your hard work in the community, you're rewarded with access to information that makes you even better at what you've been doing already.
Exactly.
Yep.
Oh, that's cool.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
I mean, I'm left out, but
So if folks want to learn more about it, they can go to the mvp.support.microsoft.com website.
You can nominate people, as I recall.
That's correct. And if people are interested in becoming MVPs, send an email to to other MVPs, and they can nominate.
Right. And yes, Rory, I have nominated you.
Cool.
Yes.
Sweet.
Yeah. I can't promise anything.
Here comes
I don't
a
make
tropical island with the coconut-flavored beverages.
That's right. The first question he's gonna ask is, does Bill like Pepsi or Coke? You know. We have a question from Jan Erik, and he's from Norway. SQL 2000 with no service pack versus SQL 2000 with SP3. A customer of mine has an ASP.NET application with a SQL Server 2000 without SP as backend. Service pack. Due to heavy load and security concerns, they bought a new server, and I am moving the database to it. The new server has Windows Server 2003 installed, and because 2003 doesn't support SQL without SP3, SP3 is added. But when I change the connection string to collect data from the new server, a lot of data is missing. I have isolated the problem to an outer join query. The SQL code isn't altered in any way with the new install. Am I missing 26,000 records in the SQL 2000 with SP3 compared to SQL with no service pack? Is there any change in how the SQL 2000 SP3 handles outer joins? By the way, he has called Microsoft Premium Support, but they had no clue. Spooky problem indeed. Well, if Microsoft Premium Support had no clue, what makes you think we're going to have any idea?
Yeah, that would be a good question for one of the SQL Server MVPs. I would ask that question up in the public news groups, and hopefully one of the SQL Server MVPs can answer that.
That's a perfect way to get an answer from an MVP.
Exactly.
Also, I have another caller who has an answer to that. He says, your machine is possessed by Satan. Go to your local Catholic church, get some holy water, and sprinkle the holy water on the machine, and that should do the trick. Thanks.
I'm surprised he's running a production machine without any SPs. That's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy, actually. Yeah. And also begs the question, why are you trying to return 26,000 records in a single query? But we won't go there, Jan.
Well, so you can bind them all to a list box.
Yeah, I want to see that font. That'd be a very small font, as Bill Vaughn likes to say. Another one here. Let me just pull up this call from Dan Hawkins. Dan says, "Hi, I heard the question about view state and text box values. I had the same question when I first started ASP.NET development, and so went searching. What I found was that control values like text boxes are not handled by view state. They are automatically restored by matching the posted variable and control name. This article explains everything, and he points us to a link that we will definitely put on the site."
Right. So, there's a lot of paradigm shifts that occur when you go from ASP to ASP.NET, and this is the most common area where people have problems because they're used to ASP where you had to pull the values manually out of the controls in the post pack and repopulate them, and then also set the state of, like for a drop-down, which item was selected.
Right.
Where ASP.NET does that for you automatically now. And, there's other paradigm shifts that folks should realize also. And I can go through a few of those if you like.
Yeah, sure, please.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I usually have a talk where I give give like 10 paradigm shifts, but I'll just say a few during this brief time here. The main one, or actually there's several. And nowadays, rather than using the response.write, you actually program against a server control. And so rather than using the response.write or %equals, you use the control.text, for example, like textbox.text, and you're actually programming against a control that has properties, methods, and events. And so that shift of now, not to say that you can't do a response equal or response.write, but
it's just not the preferred way, right?
Yeah, and so the other one is the automatic HTML code generation. Back in ASP, if you had a low-end browser, Netscape or whatever, and the high-end IE, you actually had to have forks in your code that would do the different HTML for those types of browsers, and it became very complex. Well, now with ASP.NET, the page will sniff to see what browser's out there and generate the correct HTML for the browser. And this is a huge time savings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another thing you want to mention to those who are hearing about server-side controls or controls for the first time is that they are running on the server. And unlike controls that you would instantiate in a web form, they do not go down to the client like an ActiveX control and instantiate there. They are simply objects that get created on the server that then spit out HTML. Right. So I just wanted to clarify that.
And so some of the common problems of, how do you add a client-side event to like a button? Because the web control button is generating the HTML. And so you don't really have a chance to put the, like the on-click event. And so the trick is to use the attributes.add properties or methods of the control, and then it will generate the script and insert the script for you.
Right. Oh, cool.
Yeah. And the other things are like, separation of HTML from the code. So now either you have the inline code, which is really, the script tag with a run equals server, and then the HTML down below, or there's a code behind, which is a Visual Studio.net type of concept. And so you're able to separate the code. With back in ASP, you had a combination of server-side script, client-side script, and HTML.
Right.
It was all kind of spaghetti code. And you kind of got used to it, And
yeah.
But some people pull those, some of that client-side stuff out into DBS files or JScript files. But nowadays, it's so nice to be able to, have the button click in a code behind page, and it's all in one spot.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I like the idea. I like your idea of having this list of 10 paradigm shifts for going from ASP to ASP.NET. Do you have this posted anywhere by any chance?
I do. Up on my website, able-consulting.com. Don't forget the dash.
We'll add a link to that right on the show page, CP.
On my technology page, I have several presentations, and one of them is migrating from ASP to ASP.NET.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's an area I'm interested in too, and I like your approach of kind of enumerating the issues that people are going to have to deal with.
Yeah, and a lot of this was just my frustration is learning ASP.NET, because I was an ASP programmer for a long time, and then I had to really shift gears and to see what the differences were, and so I just started writing them down and
great.
Well, that's cool. So we have a caller on the line, and I'm excited about this guy because he's been a regular commenter on the blog. That's actually where I met him.
Right.
I always want to pronounce his name with a French accent, Grenier, but I think that I'm supposed to say Joe.
Isn't that like a liqueur?
No, it's Grand Marnier.
Oh, okay.
Although you might call it Grand Marnier or something
Grand
sick
Mariner.
like that. But so,
Joe, how are you?
Yeah,
I'm doing all right. How are you guys?
So go ahead, Rory. Call him a dickhead.
That's one of the jokes on the blog.
To call the show was so that you would say that on the air.
All right. Okay. Well, we're gonna bleep this. But Joe, you are a freaking dickhead.
Oh, a dream come true, finally. Finally. One thing to be called it on a blog, but another thing on .NET Rocks.
How you doing, Joe?
I'm doing fine. How are you guys?
I'm good. You got a question?
Yes, I do. Actually, I had a question regarding object spaces, moving into the would-be time frame of things.
Okay.
Right now I'm working on a project where object spaces would actually be perfect, but of course I'm not allowed to use products that haven't been released to market, so I'm going to have to wait on that. But the question is, as I look at it, I'm thinking I'm going to have to be writing a lot less SQL when object spaces comes along. Now, granted, it's not perfect for every single project you're going to run into, but is this really going to kind of help me? One of the questions we were banding about this morning was, okay, fine, it's going to generate all the nice SQL calls into the database for you with its object relational mapping, but how efficient is it going to be? Am I going to have to go in and tweak all the SQL because it's not really as efficient as it could be? Is the first generation going to be lousy, and then maybe version 2 or 3 is going to be right up where it should be? I didn't know if any of you guys had an opinion on that.
CB?
Not had a chance to work with that technology, of course, in object spaces. Of course, it's as good as the developer writes the code. So, I don't know.
Rory and I are basically IMing back and forth, saying, "I have no freaking idea." We haven't done that either.
Yeah, we've
yet.
messed with Whidbey, but
right,
not so much in that area. So, oh man.
I mean, I know it's a an object relational management kind of tool, and it's going to generate database code in the middle tier, but we don't know.
Joe, for asking that question, you are a dickhead.
I thought I was one before, but that's okay.
Double dickhead.
I actually just called for the free stuff, honestly. They said, ask this question about object spaces just to get on.
Right, yeah, it's just an excuse. Well,
couldn't you have asked something easier? Because what's my favorite color?
Well, Joe, because you're such a fan, we're going to give you a .NET Rocks clock with mine and Rory's mugs on it and 12 digits and things that go around and around. So
that actually works perfectly because our clock back here in the area we're working in is broken, and I haven't known what time it is for months.
Just been sitting in the office waiting for closing time. Yeah,
definitely.
Thanks for calling. Give Jeff your mailing address or email us so that we can mail that to you. And thanks for calling, man.
Yeah, later, Joe. It's good to hear from you.
I'm actually looking forward to when the ASP.NET Whidbey comes out. That's a great tool from what I've seen so far. You have to write. You write a lot less code to create great looking websites.
I totally agree. And
the master pages, what a concept. They've done a great job in that area. So
people are going to be blown away by Whidbey.
Yep.
Okay.
Whenever I get in front of Whidbey, I just sit there and start writing things with generics. I don't even care what I'm doing.
Right.
I start making long lists of generics, and I laugh about how I don't have to generate my custom collections, my strongly typed collections.
I like it where I don't have to recreate a login page. I just use the login control now.
Yeah.
And, a lot of great improvements.
Yeah, I like as Rory said. I think generics are most exciting for me too. Even as a VB programmer, I don't care about my dot whatever, but generics are really cool.
Well, it's because we used to have to write pages, literally, of code just so that we could have a collection that appeared strongly typed. But behind the scenes, it was still...
casting and all that stuff.
Casting back and forth, and you had to maintain that code, and you had to lug it around with you.
Yep.
It was like a big suitcase full of garbage. Although at the same time, it was fun. So I'm going to miss that because, nerds,
so
they
is
like
hitting
doing stuff like that.
So hitting yourself in the head with a hammer is fun when you stop. It feels good
small
when you
hammer.
stop. But, yeah. Okay. So Carl, let's see. What else is on our list of things to talk about? Well, you have your paradigm shifts. You have your connection strings.
Well, maybe a few tips and tricks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Tips and tricks are good.
They're always good.
Current technology. So, a lot of folks don't know, but they can store data views in a session variable.
Well, we can store any object in a session, can't we?
Most people in all the documentation says that, you can data tables or a data set, but, a data view, a view is based off a data table.
Right.
And so, you store the data view in there, and, at first you think, well, is it making a copy of the data table?
Carl, let's back up a little bit because I don't even know if we've ever talked about data views on .NET Rocks before. So, so let's explain what they are.
Well, sure. You have a data set, and the data set contains one-to-many data tables. And then for each data table, you can have a data view. A data view allows you to sort or filter any of the data in the data table. And so once you get the query, maybe it's sorted one way when you do the query and you populate the data table. And now rather than going back to the database, you can just create a data view and resort and refilter what you've obtained in the data table now.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. And
the data table, to even go even a little more fundamental, the data table and the data set are really a database-looking collection-based cache of data that comes from somewhere. It doesn't care where it comes from, that you can use to manipulate that data and bind it without having to worry about directly binding to the database.
Exactly. So what happens when you store the data view in a session, you might think it's making a copy of the data table, but it's not. It's actually, and I think Tom Zek, I think it is his name, who noticed this correct behavior. It happens that the data view still has a reference to the existing data table, and so that data table does not go away.
Sure.
And so it persists between between calls if you put the data view in a session variable.
Wow.
Which is actually kind of cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
And of course, the usual warnings apply. Like depending on where you're keeping session state, you may or may not want to do this, right?
True.
Exactly.
If you're keeping, that's a good question, Rory. What if you're keeping it on another machine? Does the object reference get passed across the
Well, it has to get
boundary?
serialized, and then
Does it serialize it, or does it actually just store like the pointer to the reference?
No,
if you go to a different machine, you're going to get another session, right? So you have to repopulate that session variable.
Well, and I'm pretty sure doesn't it serialize the object when it's storing it on an out of proc or actually on another machine? Isn't that what's going on? I thought I remember reading that in an article, in one of Dino's articles.
We'll have to get to the bottom of that and provide a link.
Depends on how you have sessions set up also, whether it's in proc or on a state machine or in SQL Server. Yeah.
So if it's on a state machine or the ASP.NET state object, or if it's in SQL Server, what you're saying is you can't count on that reference to be there all the time. It doesn't maintain it. You have to read it back because it gets serialized. Is that what you're saying, CP?
I believe so.
Yeah.
But a lot of people use the improc.
Right.
So
exactly.
it's a good tip. Yeah, it's just you got to remember.
True.
Yeah.
So, I think CP, this gets to the heart of a topic that is very close to my heart for Visual Basic programmers, which is just understanding the difference between reference types, value types, and understanding what an object is when you look at it, and especially when you assign it. When I say my reference type, like a data view, one variable equals another variable, what am I really doing? And VB programmers are very much used to value types for everything. Whereas, we're thinking that an exact copy is going to be made of that when I use the equal sign. But with reference types, it's not the case. I mean, you're basically adding another reference to an object that exists somewhere else that you're not actually touching.
Exactly.
And so, and it really does affect the decisions you make. Like, for example, when you, on a data set or a data table, use a getChanges method, that returns a copy. So that's like of getting a copy of a reference type. So it's more like a value type assignment. But that gets a copy of the table or the data set where the changes are made. But if you just use something like, get errors or the select method on a data table, for example, that returns an array of data row objects, those are just references into the data that's in the data table.
Right.
So you got to know the difference between those things because it can seriously affect the decisions you make in your code.
Yeah. Another one that people tend to forget is when you create an instance like a data row, and you have an object, but you still have to add it to the rows collection.
Right.
There's a lot of things like that where you create the object, but you got to add it to the collection.
Right. Just because you said new row doesn't mean it's in the rows collection.
Exactly. A lot of people get bit like that. But another tip and trick is in Visual Studio.NET. A lot of people want to see what's inside the data table. And so, they go down to maybe the command window, and they type in a question mark, and they go ds.tables, and maybe
and
the
Carl,
0 and the rows 0 and then item 0.
Carl, it used to be there in version 1 of the framework. We used to be able to go into the items in the data table in the autos and locals window.
Yeah.
And you can't do that now in Visual Studio 2003.
So here's the trick. And so you go down to the command window, and you do a question mark and the dataset name dot get XML. And that spits up all the XML, and then at a glance you can see everything.
Of course. Why didn't I think of that, Rory?
Because you're stupid, Carl. I don't know.
Carl, man, you just made my day, man.
And of course,
it's a great time saver.
You get the nice VS.NET 2003 IntelliSense in the command window too, which is
that's
cool.
right.
Oh yeah.
That makes me so happy. I had to give a shout out to that just because.
Carl, I'll tell you, anytime I get a tip like that, I think, why didn't I think of that? I just am so happy. Thank you very much. That's great.
You're welcome.
And I didn't even have to pay for it. That's the best part.
Well, I got one more for you.
Okay.
So, a lot of times when I'm working, I used to have Notepad up, and I would paste common things that I wanted to I copy and paste into Notepad, these common pieces. And then I noticed there was the Visual Studio.NET has a clipboard ring tab.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So and then all your copies go into there.
Yeah.
So you don't have to use Notepad to paste common stuff. You just look in the Notepad ring, which is on the toolbar, I believe. That works great.
Doug Haynes says he thinks it holds 24 or 25 of the last copies. The only time I don't like clipboard rings is like when I'm using Outlook or Word or something, and I just want one copy, and that damn thing pops
It opens
out.
up automatically.
Me too. That bugs the heck out of me. I don't know why it's different between between there and the other, but I don't like the
pop-up windows in general really piss me off.
And you tell it to go away, and it doesn't. It's like that uncle who comes over and unpacks and sleeps on your couch.
He's got the cigar, and his personality takes up the whole room. And he goes, all right, let me tell you about this trip I took to New Zealand.
Then he puts the cigar out in the guacamole dip.
Yeah, I hate that.
Frickin'
Got
jerk.
one more for you. So, when you're down in the properties window, and there's a little, and you want to edit something, there's not a lot of room to edit down in there. You have to go clear to the end of the string or something.
True.
So what you do is you double-click on the title bar of the property window, and it opens it up to be a floating window, and you can drag and make it bigger, and then you can edit your heart's content. And if you double-click again on the title bar, it puts it back into the original spot again.
CP, day one, VBNet Masterclass. That's in there.
It is.
That's been
cool.
in there since I started. That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Double-click, it pops out, double-click, it pops back, and that gets rid of see, this is the way I present that to my students. I say, we get rid of DLL hell in .NET, but we have a few new hells. And hell number one is docking hell.
Yeah.
And that's it, So the cure for docking hell, what's the cure for docking hell?
Well, whenever I get back into a position where I can't put it back, I always just go up to tool options and do the reset of the toolbar.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Doug is saying double-click the line number for what?
Bottom right, and then you can type in the line number that you want to go to in your code.
You type in the line number that you want to go to in the bottom right, like in the immediate window?
It comes up with a pop-up, and you can type in the line number that you want to go to.
Oh, there's a line number dialog box. Oh, cool. Do you have the line numbers turned on?
Oh, yeah.
In your code?
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't have those line numbers turned on.
We have Doug in the studio today.
Yeah, that's true. Doug Haynes is here. He's sort of, he's one of our regulars. Just hangs out and listens to the show.
So I got one more for you, and this is more of where you move and drag and drop the tabs. There's different tabs, and sometimes you want maybe a new vertical, so you can have two views of the same source code with different tabs. Mm-hmm. Well, you can drag the tabs around, and we're talking about the code tabs now. The horizontal ones right above the code windows here. You can drag those. And so, for example, you open up several files and then click on and drag on one of the tabs, one of the open files, and move it to another position. And so you can move those around. You can also drag them onto the page, and a little pop-up will pop up, dialog will pop up, and I ask if you want to create a new horizontal tag group or a new vertical tag group.
Yeah, sweet.
Select one of those, and presto, you have one of those split screens.
That's cool. I like the stuff in Whidbey that I've seen in ASP.NET Whidbey for custom personalization. Right out of the box, you can create a website that has this feature in it, and it's like an intranet or internet website with personalization. And the user can just basically drag columns and panes in and out and it's all like built in. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Yep. That's a really cool feature. And then, of course, don't forget when you do when you have all those windows open, don't close each one. You can go up to the windows and do a close all.
Right. That's good to know. Yeah. I like the dragging around of the tabs, though, especially when I'm working with ASP.NET, because then I can take the code behind and bring it back next to the ASPX file, so I don't have everything strewn around all hodgepodge.
Hodgy-widgy
Hodgety-podgety.
Like the British wiki-tacky wacky-sacky.
We're going to get some hate mail for that, Carl.
I know. The Brits, they have these crazy lollipop names for streets and things like...
Crazy lollipop names?
Worky-tacky wiki-placky. I don't know. Okay. Now our switchboard is lighting up like a Christmas tree, and they're all coming from the UK.
All right, so we do have a caller. We've got Ben on the line. Ben Zamora, is that right?
Yes, it is.
All right.
I actually have a question about using GUIDs in a data set. When you're using a data set on the client side, the GUID seems like a really obvious fit for using a key, in your key auto increment column. Have you guys had any experience with this? And what's your best way of using that with a SQL Server database? And what type of a data type would you use in that data column?
Good question, Ben. CP?
Yeah, I generally use auto numbers and not GUIDs. But there's two schools of thoughts: whether you use an identity value or a unique identifier such as a GUID. There's pros and cons to each. I guess I lean toward the auto or the identity value.
I agree.
Are you going to take a big hit on the SQL Server if you're using a GUID versus an auto number column?
Well, it's a larger size, so there's more disk space being used, and I don't know how performance-wise. Carl, do you know?
Yeah, I do have some. I don't have any numbers, but I know that GUIDs obviously take up more processing power.
Yeah.
Whether it's going to break the bank obviously is determined by the scalability of your system. But I mean, SQL Server is one of those technologies that's infinitely scalable. You know, you can add more boxes to it, and it just performs better, and it has more storage. And so I don't ever think that there's an issue with performance if you just keep throwing hardware at it. But I don't have any numbers, like I said, but it definitely does take a hit. I know people who use GUIDs in certain situations. They felt they needed to use them. I am a big fan of keeping things as simple as possible. I'm with Carl Prothman here that I like the identity values. Also, identity values make it easier to use in VisualStudio.net with the ADO Net wizards that expect a primary key. And for example, if you turn on cascading updates with a data set, if you use that and just fill in with auto number columns, set the auto increment value of a column to true, and you just let the user go ahead and enter data. When they go and save that data, those values, those primary key values, are replaced with what's in the database, and it doesn't matter what they are when you're just sort of detached and disconnected. So I think that...
And actually, where my question comes up sort of ties into what you guys had been discussing earlier, where a lot of people run into a problem where they're not aware when they're passing things by reference and by value. Because
Right.
If you're creating like a data layer and you go, you run an update on a data set, you're doing that by reference. So that's how a lot of those auto increment columns are being updated when you make that run back and forth to
Yes.
your SQL database.
Yes.
But what if you're using a true message-oriented system where you're sending Delta packets to your backend, getting Delta packets back? How do you reconcile those auto increment numbers? Because you're not running that reference back and forth again. You're at just some value that's come in and
Right.
come back. How do you get back to pushing that back into those if you're
Right.
using an auto increment
Right.
field?
One way that Bill Vaughn suggests to do that is to instead of just simply creating them on the client and shoving them back to the server, what you do is when you're going to add some records, you go to the database and you add some blank records, either with nulls or with default values, and you return those records and allow the user to edit them in a sense. And so now you're not doing an update. Now you're just doing an update instead of adding columns directly from the client. You know what I mean? So they come back to the client with the primary keys already there. Now you're essentially doing an update, and that also gets around some concurrency issues.
Yeah.
Right, and this is sort of in the move toward smart clients where I want to have very small messages being passed and forth between the client and the server, and you end up with a really chatty interface. There's been a lot of .NET developers out there that have really been preaching message-oriented interfaces and trying to stay away from those chatty interfaces. As you're exchanging those updated values.
Let's see what our guest has to say about that.
Yeah, typically with identity values, you call store procedure and then you return as an output parameter the new identity value, and you can read that from your ADO.NET code.
Oh, that's a great tip.
Yep. As far as data type goes, so the other part of the question. So a unique identifier is what is SQL Server is the data type for SQL Server. And in .NET, you could use the SQL DB type of unique identifier. And I on my website, I have a data mapping, data type mapping page, which maps all of the .NET to SQL Server to Access to Oracle to VB, etc.
And then, as we move toward the WYSI 2 timeframe, I see a lot more of being able to pass messages back and forth. And I guess if you move away from GUIDs in a data set, you really can't think of using data sets to pass around between clients. I know you normally use a specialized class or a struct to get better performance. But I could also see passing several data sets around between separate clients and trying to consolidate them, sort of for like thinking in the terms of like a collaboration software. So I think you sort of would have to move away from data sets for something like that.
It's true. Data sets aren't the solution to every problem.
And it almost seems like you should have like a something beyond the auto increment column in the data set, and maybe there should be a GUID, a GUID auto incrementer in the data set.
Or a GUID generator. I mean, you can certainly do that yourself with your own code, right?
I believe so, but then you run into the problem of updating your data set and having all of your auto-generated code trashed.
Cool. Well, Ben, we have a gift for you. Do you have an Xbox, Ben?
Yes, I do.
All right. Do you have Halo for the Xbox?
I do now, I hope.
Yes, you do. All right. We'll send you a copy. So we're going to let you go, and KB is going to take your address, and we'll send you that Xbox.
Great, thank you.
Game, Xbox game.
Xbox game. Did I say Xbox? No, it's the game, Halo. Yeah. Okay, well...
this is not a legally binding contract. He said he was going to send me an Xbox.
Our friend from Australia, Eric Jarby, who we read an email last show, asked the question, has CP ever used remoting with ASP.NET? So data is decoupled from the web server and remoted in a data server. What are the trade-offs?
I have not used remoting. Typically, the ASP, the web server, will talk to a back-end SQL server. If I do have middle-tier business objects, they will be in the same process as my web server. So I have not used remoting.
I haven't either.
Yeah, I don't think I do it in that.
I wouldn't. Remoting is really used for a different purpose, but hey, it's there and you can use it.
It might be just his particular situation, though. You never know. They might have some system that's front end with
you may need
with
it.
remoting, and that's the only way they have to plug into it.
Johannes Hansen asks, and he's from Denmark. He asks, in ASP.NET, you can declare an application variable by using public shared var name as string instead of application var name in quotes in parentheses, but which is better? Application var name implies that you're using the application object, right? Which is totally different from declaring a local variable.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
So I think the answer to that one is, use the application object if you need to share those variables across every session, and even then you should be locking it and unlocking it.
Yep.
This brings up another point, yeah. This brings up another issue, though, and I don't know about anybody else. This might just be a stylistic thing, but because I try to design my applications before I start coding them, I typically have a good idea of what I'm gonna be dealing with, and I like to wrap my application and session variables in property wrappers, so that I have static classes. Well, I have classes with static members, so that I can just get to those things strongly.
That's a good tip.
Yeah. I love doing that. I hate working on large projects.
Hates working on large projects.
I do. It drives me nuts. I hate working on those large projects where you just have string literals scattered throughout referring to application and session variables, because it's so error prone.
Yep.
It's so messy. And what if you want to change one of the names? What if you have to change one of the names?
Yep. You're screwed.
Yeah. The other thing I do is I use pseudo namespaces for my application and session variables.
Classes as namespaces, basically, or?
Well, what I'll do is, just to absolutely ensure that there are no naming conflicts whatsoever for my application and session variables, I'll have my application variable name be, for example, I don't know, like customer.firstname or something like that if I'm storing that in an application. Well, I wouldn't store that in an application variable, but in a session variable, for example. I like to just wrap the hell out of everything.
CP, we have another question here. This is from our friend Mark Kenyon from Century Color. He just can't get enough of us.
Well, Mark rocks.
He's a big fan. Yeah. And also a customer, by the way. Happy customer. CP, when I do an Ole data adapter.fill, parentheses ds, comma, and in quotes, dataset name, what does no current record mean? The select command has one parameter. No current record. Does that mean it came back with nothing?
That's an error message that's being returned?
Yeah, that's an error message that's being returned.
Either the data table wasn't created or something?
That's what I would say. I would say maybe he's got a problem in his connection string, or maybe he's didn't connect, or the database went for a ride, or I don't.
Yeah, I would make sure you do that in a try catch and use the SQL exception and then take a look at the properties in there, because that has a little bit more information.
Yeah, the stuff about data sets in service-oriented architecture certainly is interesting. But you know what? The way I look at it is, Microsoft is all about adapting to the needs of the developers and the architectures. So I'd be very surprised if they didn't, morph that stuff into more appropriate architecture. And as much as they could morph. And I'm not saying anything in disguise here that I know. I'm just guessing.
No comment.
Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Doug has a general VBNet question here. I noticed a problem in VBNet 2003. When I switch to release from debug, my forms lose the link to the FRX file, the form file, so I end up with only the code. I go back to debug, and sometimes it will relink, but not every time. This is mainly in WinForms. I know it's not database related, but has anyone else seen this, or should I just reinstall ARG?
Yeah, I've not seen that.
Yeah, I haven't. I generally leave release off until the very last moment. But then again, you release it, you have bugs, you have to fix it. You have to.
But with ASP.NET web applications, that's the most common thing people forget to do is put it in release mode.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So and so you get the debug file that's created, and plus when you're in debug mode, when you hit the first page, only that page gets compiled. Whereas if you have it in production, then all the pages in that directory get compiled.
On the first hit?
On the first hit.
Sweet.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Wow.
That's good to know. I did not know that.
So, CP, you want to be like a regular on the show, just sort of hang out on the phone in the background anytime, you have something. You're just like Mr. Tip Guy today. I love this.
Yeah. The other thing that a lot of people get confused with is, back in ASP, you didn't have a worker process. You had IS working through all the requests.
Right.
And now with ASP.NET, ISS hands it off to a worker process, which has its own identity. Mm-hmm. And in IIS 5.0 and 5.1, it uses the ASP.NET local user account. And, of course, in Windows Server 2003, it uses the network services account. And a lot of people get confused with those because, for example, they try to hit a database and they get this error message saying the ASP.NET user account doesn't have access. And they're going, well, what is that? So,
right.
You have to be aware of this worker process and its identity.
Well, CP, Mark Kenyon is actually on the phone now. He's going to clarify our, this error he's getting. Mark, hello.
Hello.
How are you, man?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good.
Hey, Mark.
I'm going through filling up a data set with a couple of tables. And the one table with this parameter doesn't return any records. Is there a better way to handle it than just through catching the OLADB exception?
You should not get an exception if it's just that there are no records that come back. You should, then you'll have an empty table.
How are you accessing the data then? Is this a typed data set or?
Nope, it's just a plain data set.
And are you binding, or are you actually pulling the value out of the row?
Well, I'm passing the parameter. It's an integer.
Right.
I put it into the select command, and then I run the data adapter. And it's when the data adapter fill command fires that I get the exception. Now, when I run the query itself through the database, I get the same message, no current record. So is it something then with my query is wrong?
What are you doing in your query? Are you doing joins, anything special?
Let me take a
look.
While you're taking a look, Mark, I want to mention to the listeners that if they know the secret namespace of the week, to go ahead to www.franklins.net/call.netrocks and send us a message and let us know what it is right now, and we'll pick from the correct. We'll pick one lucky listener from the who have the correct answers, and we'll give them a copy of Windows Server 2003 Enterprise Edition with 25 client-side licenses.
Can I say something?
Sure.
My friend Jim Blizzard, Artie, back on the West Coast, is we've been IMing a little bit here, and he's suggesting that are you trying to use the rows on the table without checking to see if there are any? Is that
no? This is simply calling the query and trying to get the records back.
So it's when you do a fill, you get the error.
Yeah, it is a join query though.
Interesting.
And the same error occurs if you're in Query Manager or a Query Analyzer and run the query?
Actually, it's an Access database.
Oh, well, that's the whole problem there.
Problem. Access, is required. It is built for exactly one user. You know that, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And it has a different syntax sometimes. So are you using ANSI standard SQL, or is this a custom SQL, or what are you...
I'm just doing OLADB calls to it.
So what I would do is try to...
Move to MSD. Sorry, I had something caught in my throat there.
You can go into Access and do the query, and then go, and copy that query, and then put it into the select command of the data adapter, and see if that works. So use what's generated in Access rather than trying to write it by hand.
Oh, no, I am using what's in Access. It's a query that's stored in the Access database. I think what I need to do is spend some more time and just upgrade it to SQL.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of problems with the because you're probably using the OLADB.NET data provider along with the JET OLADB provider, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that technology is fine, but you really want to move up to SQL Server or MSDN or MSDE. And get to a real database.
I agree. I totally agree.
With Dino Perlot's help, I've been upgrading some of my databases here, but this is one that I just haven't had the time to update yet, so I guess I'll just have to work on that.
All right, Mark. Well, thanks for calling. And
thanks, man.
We'll talk to you on the flip side.
Yep.
And Rory, we have a winner.
Who?
The winner is Josh Pollard.
Josh.
Yay! Congratulations, Josh. You win the goodies.
G-Man.
And what was the secret namespace?
The secret namespace was system.web.mail. So there you go.
So what's he winning exactly again?
He is going to win a copy of not Visual Studio. He's going to win a copy of Windows Server 2003 Enterprise Edition with 25 client site licenses.
Just for listening to a frickin' show.
I know. What's such a deal, man?
Wow.
Microsoft. We get this stuff from Microsoft, but we should put a premium on it. If he gets it right, we should charge him $25.
That's true. We got to make a little money on this. Actually, another thing I want to say is that Microsoft with a capital M isn't what provides the booty for our show.
Right.
It's actually the regional director program at Microsoft. So
a middle case M.
Yes, it's a middle case M. It's a specific program at Microsoft that is giving us the goodies. Well, Carl, you got any last-minute words of wisdom to impart on our listening audience?
Yeah, absolutely. In order to learn .NET, you have to program every day. I don't care if you're doing Hello World or whatever. Go through tutorials, but do it every day.
Practice, yeah.
And practice makes perfect.
Practice makes perfect, indeed. Yep. Okay.
Wait, before we go, Carl.
Yeah?
Don't bring the music up too much quite yet. I'm going to shout over it, okay? Lars Larson sent us a message that says, "Thanks for the show, guys. It is the best thing I have found on the internet ever." So I thought we should get a shout out to him.
Lars,
that's such
you
a cool
rock,
thing to
man.
Say. Thanks, Lars.
All right, well, Carl, on behalf of myself, Rory, and the listening public, keep rocking.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.